Reaching out from my Ashland, Oregon studio, where I work as a painter and printmaker, to other women artists, nationally and internationally, has inspired my own artwork. Reaching out from Southern Oregon State College, where I have been teaching art for over 30 years, has enabled me to present students with a first-hand view of non-Western cultures. The process of reaching out has also resulted in the publication of 4 books concerning women artists' contributions in Latin America, Asia, Africa, as well as the United States. In the United States, I have been particularly impressed by the art of Pablita Velarde, Minnie Okubo, and Lois Mailou Jones. Now, in the 7th, 8th, and 9th decades of their lives, they continue to create paintings, murals, drawings, and prints. Their distinctly individual aesthetic visions are related to their Native American, Asian American, and African American heritages. Through their life experiences and persistent creative production, we become aware of their professional struggles and ultimately their significant contributions as American women artists. Pablita Velarde is one of the first women artists of Native American heritage to receive national and international recognition. She was one of the first Native American women to move away from traditional pottery making and embroidery to become a painter and want to open doors for other women. She says, "When I first started painting, there was no public interest or market for Indian art, but I was stubborn enough to stick to it, and then it took hold somehow." Pablita Velarde was born in 1918 at Santa Clara, New Mexico, one of 19 closely clustered Pueblo Indian communities. After graduating from the Catholic Mission School, Pablita was able to go to the Santa Fe Indian School. From 1932 to 1936, her teacher was Dorothy Dunn, who encouraged her development as an artist and specifically as a painter.
When I got out of the school, I knew I could paint, but my paintings didn't sell that well. I was too amateurish and I guess didn't know how to use sales pressures and stuff like that, and didn't have the looks either because I didn't have enough show clothes to wear.
Pablita's early work really shows what kind of disciplined brushwork she was able to master, and also a very careful contour line. Her colors were applied in a flat style using opaque water-based paints and sometimes the earth pigments that she ground herself. She didn't deal with shadows, and her forms were created in a flat pattern-like style. And in addition to Dorothy, there have been a few other very dedicated people.
Yeah, I had a good connection with Ernest Thompson Seton, and he and his wife took me on a tour back east.
When you were very young.
That was the first time that I left New Mexico.
A lot of Pablita's early paintings dealt with what it was like to be a woman on the reservation and women's activities, including the making of pottery on the Santa Clara Pueblo, which actually to this day her sisters are still doing. But Pablita was really immersed in painting. That was her love. She worked in various media. One was casein on cardboard or masonite, and the other that she became very well known for were her earth paintings, where she actually ground rocks and the various colors of the New Mexican earth and used that with a white glue for her pigment basis.
Messed around trying to be a potter and never succeeded in making pottery.
Pottery making is something that most of the women still do on the Santa Clara Indian Reservation. Velarde was the first Native American woman to essentially really break away from pottery production and to get into painting, which was then pretty much a male activity.
At least that made a little hot money, so we could eat maybe a piece of meat every once in a while instead of stealing chickens from my dad.
Oh.
Well, he had a lot of chickens,
and since then she's come a long way in terms of recognition and achievement. Later she turned to her childhood memories of the annual seasonal ceremonies held in the plaza, the horses that she rode, or the birds, deer, and other animals that had often appeared at her door. It was as if she became a spectator of her past in order to tell about her native culture to others.
I showed a lot of the things that the Indians used to do way back before modern science came into their life.
In 1939, Pablita was asked to paint a series of images for Bandolera National Monument. She completed 84 paintings depicting in detail what Pueblo Indian life was like around the 1900s.
And so I was able to build my own home. It wasn't a fancy one, it was just a 3-bedroom. But what I had in my mind too was show the woman that a woman don't have to be just mama and housekeeper. And I didn't get married until I was almost 27. And then I got crazy and got married.
In 1942, Pablita married Herb Hardin, who was Anglo. There were 2 children that were born, Herb Jr. and Helen Hardin. Like Velarde, her daughter Helen Hardin achieved national and international recognition for her geometrically stylized images of Native American life. Her brilliant career was cut short by her untimely death from cancer in 1984 at age 41.
Of course, their work is different from mine, and now my grandson is into it with his metal art.
But the marriage didn't last long, and essentially Velarde raised the children herself.
I had a period of very deep depression after Herb left, and I started to put my thoughts into words, and then I got interested in getting the legends put on paper.
In 1955, in conjunction with her father, a renowned storyteller, Velarde began to make tapes of the legends of her pueblo, and it also led to her painting a very important image, Old Father, the Storyteller. It became the theme of a book which was published in 1960 and selected in 1961 as one of the best Western books of the year.
My kids used to laugh at me when I was trying to tell them the story, They couldn't picture it in their heads what I was talking about. So I painted the picture first, and then I read them the story the way I had written it by that time. And then they understood, and they said, "Oh, that's nice." When you were telling it before we saw the picture, we didn't even know what you were talking about.
Pablita continued to record these legends, and this created quite a disturbance at the pueblo. The elders didn't feel comfortable with her doing this. They felt she was taking their secrets. At one point, she felt so disturbed by their admonishing her, by their scolding her, that she created a painting, a self-portrait that was a way of reflecting upon the emotions she was experiencing. And it shows her on her knees, beseeching the moon for protection almost from the elders because she feared their retribution. Another painting that is very important is the Rabbit Hunt, a memory painting. Every aspect, every detail of the hunt is carefully portrayed, from the search and discovery of the rabbits in their holes to their final demise. An important breakthrough occurred when Velarde was able to win a major prize for one of her paintings at an annual competition at the Philbrook Art Institute. Before that, mostly men had won these prizes.
And up till then, no woman had ever been awarded that kind of a prize. And I was the only Southwest stubborn woman from here, that kept entering whether I won anything or not. But that was the first time that they awarded a woman any kind of a prize.
When the Pueblo Indian Culture Center in Albuquerque was completed in 1977, Velarde was commissioned to paint a large acrylic mural in the courtyard. She said that the significance of the buffalo herd dance is to honor the spirit of the animals killed in the hunt. She's also included a realistic portrait of herself as one of the dancers, positioned between the 2 hunters that are wearing huge buffalo headdresses. It was unusual for a woman artist at this time to portray herself in a public work, dancing among the men, one of the groups celebrating this particular joyous event.
Your work has really been a documentation of your people and the day-to-day life and the different rituals.
Yeah, I did a lot of the old traditional way of life, you know, and it's working now that people are glad I do those kind of paintings.
She persists in recording the traditions of the past through her vivid and carefully detailed paintings. In the 7th decade of her life, Velarde remains rooted in her culture and environment and modest about her accomplishments, which are slowly being recognized within mainstream American art. The ever-changing style of Japanese-American artist Mine Okubo reflects her many-faceted search for truth in a materialistic world. The bewilderment and humiliation felt by 110,000 West Coast Japanese Americans isolated and interned in camps during the Second World War is dramatically expressed in the series of somber charcoal drawings. And yet Okubo's canvas could also reflect the joy and innocence of childhood, the exhilaration of life in colorful flowers and playful animals. And these examples are just two of Okubo's many contrasting moods. Okubo's mother was a calligrapher, painter, and graduate of the Tokyo Art Institute. Soon after coming to America, she married Okubo's father, who was a learned man and a scholar. Her mother's creative endeavors were submerged in the struggle to raise 7 children, but she wanted Mine to pursue her interest in art.
She didn't exactly encourage, but I could see it all. They came here as a complete idealism and everything going out the window. The Japanese, they had everything against them. The prejudice, and they couldn't get citizenship, nothing.
In spite of these obstacles, Mine graduated with a master's degree in art at the University of California at Berkeley in 1936. 2 years later, she won the university's highest honor, which afforded her the opportunity of visiting Europe, where she produced many watercolor paintings. Shortly after her return from Europe, Mine participated in the Federal Art Project in California, working in collaboration with Diego Rivera.
He was doing the big mural up on the top, and everybody would say, she's the daughter of Diego's 7th wife.
The completion of her murals coincided with the outbreak of the Second World War and President Roosevelt's executive order for all West Coast Japanese Americans to be interned in remote relocation camps throughout the country.
Yeah, in 3 weeks we had to get rid of everything and be ready to be sent to the assembly center.
When you arrived at the internment camp, you brought all your skills with you and you used them to document this experience.
They didn't have any cameras that were not allowed, you see, and immediately I went out to do minute sketches and then of everything in camp. And finally, after relocation, everybody was leaving camp right away when the royalty test was cleared. And I decided to stay back and finish this set of drawings that I was doing for my friends. The book which turned into Citizen 13660.
Okubo produced a series of watercolors depicting the everyday life of the uprooted Japanese Americans in the camp. Upon her release from the camp in 1944, Okubo moved to New York City, where she began her commercial art career as an illustrator for several leading magazines, including Fortune, Time, and Life. However, within 10 years, she decided to strike out on her own as a loner on an individual road in search of truth and beauty, which she valued most. For the past 50 years, Okubo has lived and worked in this tiny Greenwich Village apartment pursuing her goals.
Well, I've been working all the time. My art is, I don't fit in with the society. I already see that you're trying to be something, and I want to be myself. I think you have to go through the galleries and the normal route if you want to get someplace.
But you chose not to?
I chose not to. I decided to do everything myself. So I pushed my book and evacuation drawings. And so I kept my art going that way, but it was a real rough road because you're totally alone in your challenge.
In Okubo's paintings of the late 1950s and 60s, she turned to folk traditions, childhood memories, and also children and animals for inspiration. During this happy period, Okubo created impressionistic portraits combined with still life and flower forms, painted with light pastel tones and occasional deeper accents of pure bright color.
I like people and life. I think it's the key to everything. And but I notice I always see all this beauty that nobody sees in flowers and colors and everything.
And your favorite creature, a cat.
Well, I thought cat was the most important creature because the cat knows exactly what he's doing, and he is kind and nice to the owners, and then he takes over. And every cat is the same thing, different, like has own personality.
By the late 1970s, the tight, compacted shapes of Okubo's paintings expanded and seemed less fragmented. In a series of beach scenes, she celebrates the bather's sensual affirmation of life with bright colors and the round, voluptuous shapes of the women relaxing on the beaches. Once again, in the 1980s, there was a dramatic change in Okubo's style. These images all contain geometrically simplified shapes in cheerful combination of flat color applications. Faces are devoid of features other than a cross suggesting the location of eyes, nose, or mouth.
I know that you're going towards universal and truth, and so it takes a long time. You're taking everything back to zero, including yourself. And so it's only a matter of simplifying what is true, universal.
A major event in Okubo's career was her 40-year retrospective held at the Elizabeth Gallery in New York City in 1985.
And just recently you did a beautiful series responding to just nature and to the squirrels jumping on the trees outside your window.
Well, I see. Abstract is just not putting a subject in. It's the same thing.
And yours are just lyrical, very beautiful color responses and color fields.
A few years later, in 1991, she was honored at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, Washington, D.C., by the Women's Caucus for Art for her lifelong dedication and achievement in art. In her latest works, Okubo has returned to the joyousness of her earlier period. Children, animals, and flowers dominate through a rich blending of dreamlike color that reflects her inner quest for peace and beauty.
I'm amazed at the scale of the work, the size, and the serenity that's coming through in your recent pieces.
Yes, and I started this in '94, starting the bigger ones. And recent ones are all sort of perpendicular like this and very serene and almost Buddha-like.
Right, and the color is gorgeous. There's a wonderful blending and a warmth that's generated.
I think it's not the good that makes you fight. It's the other way around. When everything is against you, it's when it makes you angry all the time. If something good kept happening to you, you're nowhere. I think only the good things last in the end. And you see what is in the original creator's work, all this richness, and you have this life-giving quality. You know all the life-giving qualities that are lasting.
Her creativity undiminished in her 90th year, Lois Mailou Jones continues to produce powerful paintings that are a bold blend of Western and non-Western aesthetic traditions. Born in Boston in 1905, Jones remembers that as a little child, she was always drawing. After her high school graduation in 1923, Jones won a 4-year scholarship to the Boston Museum School of Art, where she was the only African-American student. Beginning her art studies with academic realism, she evolved through Expressionism, Cubism, and finally the incorporation of flat abstract patterns inspired by African art.
Be a nice souvenir.
This was a natural progression, especially after her journeys to Haiti and Africa. The vibrant colors of Haiti and Africa caused Jones' palette to become brighter, and she incorporated many of the veve and voodoo symbols in her paintings. African wood-carved ancestral figures served as the inspiration for her painting, Les Jumeaux, in which these twins appear as sisters. While still a young woman of 24, Jones was recruited to teach at Howard University in Washington, D.C. She remained on the faculty until 1977. She'd also been advised by noted African-American sculptor Meta Warwick Fuller, if you want a success in your career, you have to go to Paris. And for Jones, this dream was about to come true.
1937 marked my sabbatical year of teaching at Howard University, and I received a General Education Board fellowship to go to study at the Académie Julia in Paris. So my dream was realized, and I'll always remember arriving in Paris, and of course at that time Josephine Baker was really the toast of Paris. The French people loved her, and so it was really interesting because she was making her contribution in the dance, and I was there as a young artist making a contribution in painting.
Jones' work during these early Paris years reflects her commitment to the organizing principles of Cubism. However, her paintings of the left bank somewhat resemble the subdued palette of Utrio's street scenes.
I remember what it did for me, the freedom of Paris. It put my feet firmly on the ground. I knew that I had talent and that I should make it.
This mask is a fairly new one, but
Yes, I recently acquired this one. It's very different from some of them that I've been using in my works, like Les Fetiches, for example. Mm-hmm. But I still like using them as inspiration for my works.
When Jones returned to America, her works were awarded many prizes, which she feels would have been denied her had it been known the artist was African American.
The career has not been easy. First of all, being a woman, and then being black, being a woman of color, was really a double handicap. But I got around that in a way because I put my work in crates and shipped them, and invariably they were accepted. But they didn't know that the artist was of color. Things that should have been shown years ago in this country are only now being presented to the public, and it's so wonderful here at my age. You know, I'm 90. So that at this late time, it's wonderful to have those works on view, to let them know what African American artists are capable of doing.
In 1953, Jones married Haitian graphic designer Louis Pierre Noel, who brought her to Haiti shortly after their marriage. This visit initiated a long and productive relationship with the Haitian people and culture.
I feel Africa in Haiti, they have never cut their ties with Mother Africa. And I have done, I think, some of my best work in Haiti because of the feeling going to the marketplaces and going to the voodoo rituals, and then the drumming and the singing and the dancing. All of that influenced my work, which made it very different from what I had been doing previously, and the life of the people and all changed my palette completely. And it continued when I went to Africa.
Lois, one of the more recent paintings that you've done last year?
I did that in Haiti. Yes, it's called Siren. You know, the mermaid of the sea is very important in Haiti voodoo. And this is one of my representations of that Siren. I went to 11 African countries on a stipend that I got from Howard University. And it was very enriching. You asked about this painting here, Trois Warriors to Afrique. You see the 3 warriors there. It's really inspired by the sculpture. That's inspiration Suriname. You know, I told you about the diaspora, and that was another one, full of design, inspiration Suriname. And so it goes on, inspiration diaspora. As I look over the span of work, it's had quite a wide circulation. Miramax Company in New York City gave me the commission to design the posters for Cry, the Beloved Country. And I rather liked the other one, which has a little more art in the handling of the whites and blacks who are in South Africa. And so many ask me, well, Lois, are you still painting? And of course I'm still painting until the last day. For example, this may interest you. These are illustrations that I have done for the Limited Editions Club in New York City. I was assigned to do the poems of Leopold Senghor, President of Senegal. And this was plate number 1, where I have done his portrait. Another poem, African Dancers. This is one of my favorite illustrations. And still another. These are still Senghor's poems. And in this one, we get something of the pattern of the masks. I think I've been very fortunate in being recognized by 2 presidents of the United States. President Carter honored me some 15 years ago, and then even more recently, the experience with the Clinton family. And it was so arranged that they came to my exhibit at the Red Barn Gallery. And I remember offering President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton one of the watercolors, which is hanging in the White House today. It makes me feel very proud.
Jones, sensitive and self-critical, remains a remarkable artist and role model. Transcending social prejudice, she possesses a wide awareness of the important role African American artists continue to play in the future of this country.
We want to be considered not apart as black artists, but as American artists. I am an American artist, and I wish to go down in history as an American artist.